Commander Zarathek adjusted her crystalline exoskeleton and surveyed the assembled team with barely concealed disdain. The Galactic Hunters Guild had assigned her another mixed-species hunting expedition, and as usual, they had seen fit to include one of those soft-skinned humans in her carefully selected group. The creature stood awkwardly among her elite hunters, fidgeting with primitive-looking equipment that seemed cobbled together from scrap metal and wishful thinking. "State your credentials, human." She clicked through her translator, her four compound eyes focusing on the unremarkable biped before her. The human straightened slightly, though still appeared dwarfed by the towering forms of her other team members. Markuskin, Mum. Recent graduate of the Terran Hunter Academy. This is my first official assignment with the guild. Several of her team members chittered in amusement. Veltar, her second-in-command, and a member of the feared Kytherian warrior caste, flexed his razor-sharp claws dismissively. "A trainee? Zarathek, surely the guild has made an error. We are hunting Class X prey on Netherworld Prime. This is no place for inexperienced younglings." Zarathek shared his sentiment completely. Her team consisted of the galaxy's most elite predators. Veltar himself had single-handedly eliminated entire hives of destroyer beetles. Syphona, her tracker, could follow a scent trail through 3-star systems and had never lost a target. Brakthul, their heavy weapons specialist, carried enough firepower to level a small city. And then there was herself, Commander Zarathek of the Apex Hunting Corps, whose crystalline carapace bore the scars of 1,000 successful hunts. And now they expected her to babysit a human. "The assignment parameters are non-negotiable," she replied curtly, though her tone made it clear what she thought of those parameters. "However, I will not compromise this mission for the sake of training procedures. Human, you will observe only. Do not interfere with established protocols. Do not engage targets without explicit authorization, and do not expect special accommodation for your species' obvious limitations." Marcus nodded quietly, seeming to shrink further into his basic combat suit. The contrast was stark compared to her team's military-grade exoskeletons and bio-enhanced armor systems. His weapon appeared to be some sort of projectile launcher, primitive even by human standards, while her hunters carried plasma cannons, molecular disruptors, and bioweapons that could dissolve organic matter at the molecular level. Syphona, her serpentine body coiling in amusement, tasted the air with her forked tongue. "He smells of fear chemicals. Are we certain this creature will not simply flee at the first sign of danger?" "Most mammals do exhibit such tendencies," agreed Brakthul, his massive frame casting the human in shadow. The Garathian's 6 arms checked and rechecked his weapon systems. "Perhaps we should establish a safe perimeter where it can observe from a distance?" Zarathek considered this practical suggestion. Netherworld Prime was infamous throughout the galaxy for its hostile ecosystem. The guild only sent hunting expeditions there for the most dangerous game, and their current target was among the deadliest creatures known to exist. Having a liability among her team could prove fatal for everyone involved. "The human will maintain position at minimum safe distance," she decided. "Veltar, you will monitor his location and ensure he does not endanger the mission through panic or incompetence." Marcus spoke up quietly. "With respect, Commander, I didn't request special treatment. I'm here to learn and contribute however possible." The audacity of the statement surprised her. Most species showed appropriate deference when addressing members of the Apex Hunting Corps. Humans were known for their peculiar social customs, but this bordered on insubordination. "Your contribution will be to stay alive and not interfere," she replied coldly. "This is not a training exercise. We are hunting void stalkers." The silence that followed was telling. Even among her experienced hunters, the mention of void stalkers carried weight. These creatures existed partially outside normal space-time, making them nearly impossible to track or predict. They could phase through solid matter, move faster than most sensors could register, and possessed enough intelligence to set complex traps for their prey. Only the most skilled hunters in the galaxy dared face them, and survival rates were notably poor even among elite teams. "Perhaps," suggested Veltar carefully, "we should brief the human on Void Stalker capabilities? If he understands the nature of our quarry, he may better appreciate the necessity for caution." It was a reasonable suggestion, though Zarathek suspected the human would simply become more frightened once he understood what they faced. She activated the tactical display, showing a three-dimensional representation of their target. The hologram materialized between them, showing a creature that defied easy description. Roughly humanoid in basic structure, but wrong in every detail. The Voidstalker appeared to shift and blur even in the static display. Its elongated limbs ended in claws that seemed to bend light around them, and its eyeless head constantly turned as though searching for prey across dimensions. Voidstalkers exist partially in our reality and partially in what humans call hyperspace, she began, noting how Marcus leaned forward to study the display intently rather than recoiling in fear. They can phase through matter at will, move at speeds approaching significant fractions of light, and possess sensory capabilities that extend across multiple dimensional planes. Standard projectile weapons are ineffective, as are most energy-based systems. What about the electromagnetic pulse grenades in my kit? Marcus asked, studying his equipment thoughtfully. The Academy mentioned that dimensional phasing requires significant energy expenditure. Could electromagnetic interference disrupt the process? The question caught her off guard. It was not the response she had expected from a frightened trainee. More surprisingly, it demonstrated actual tactical thinking rather than the blind panic she had anticipated. HFY Stories' head tilted with interest. He raises an intriguing point. Dimensional phase shifting does require enormous energy to maintain. Most electromagnetic weapons lack sufficient power to meaningfully interfere, but the principle is sound. Brackthal examined his own arsenal thoughtfully. My plasma cannon operates on similar principles, but it is designed for direct damage rather than electromagnetic disruption. The energy signature might actually attract Voidstalkers rather than repel them. Standard hunting protocols rely on quantum entanglement nets and temporal displacement fields, Zarathek explained, still somewhat puzzled by the humans' analytical approach. We attempt to trap them in normal space-time long enough to eliminate them with concentrated firepower. Success rates are approximately 30%, even among experienced teams. Marcus nodded slowly, absorbing this information. What about the environment itself? Netherworld Prime has unusual gravitational fields and electromagnetic interference patterns. Could those factors be used tactically? Again, the question demonstrated understanding beyond what she had expected. Zarathek found herself reconsidering her initial assessment, though she remained convinced that actual combat would reveal his limitations quickly enough. The planet's electromagnetic storms do provide natural interference, she acknowledged. However, they also disrupt our own equipment and communications. Most hunting teams prefer to avoid those areas. But if electromagnetic interference affects Voidstalker phasing capabilities, Marcus continued, wouldn't storm zones actually provide tactical advantages despite the equipment issues? Veltar's claws extended slightly, a sign of interest among his species. The humans suggest deliberately hunting in areas where our equipment functions poorly in exchange for potentially limiting our prey's abilities. It is an unconventional approach. It is a desperate approach, Zarathek corrected, though she could not entirely dismiss the logic. One that could leave us blind and defenseless if the theory proves incorrect. Marcus seemed to consider this carefully. What if we tested the theory on a smaller scale first? Set up electromagnetic interference in a controlled area and observe how local wildlife reacts? If dimensional creatures are affected, we would know without committing to a full engagement. The suggestion was tactically sound, which irritated her more than she cared to admit. Humans were supposed to be impulsive and emotional, not coldly logical. Their inclusion in guild teams was generally considered a political necessity rather than a tactical asset. Yet this particular human seemed to approach problems with methodical analysis. We have limited time and resources, she replied, falling back on practical objections. Our mission parameters call for direct engagement, not extended observation and testing. Of course, Commander, Marcus agreed readily. I was just thinking out loud. Syphiona had been studying the human throughout this exchange, her serpentine features expressing something approaching curiosity. Your scent markers have remained stable throughout this discussion, she observed. Most species exhibit increased stress chemicals when contemplating engagement with Class X prey. Are humans simply less intelligent than average, or do you possess unusual emotional regulation capabilities? Marcus smiled slightly at the backhanded question. Probably a bit of both, honestly. Humans tend to compartmentalize fear responses when we're focused on problem solving. The terror usually hits afterward. Afterward assumes survival. Braktul rambeld amenesli. True enough, Marcus agreed. But worrying about it beforehand doesn't improve survival odds. Better to focus on factors we can actually control. Zarathek found this pragmatic attitude somewhat unexpected. Most species either exhibited appropriate fear responses or else engaged in bravado to mask their terror. The humans seemed genuinely unconcerned with the emotional aspects of their situation, treating it as a technical challenge rather than a life-threatening ordeal. Very well, she decided. We will proceed with standard protocols initially. If opportunities arise to test your electromagnetic theory safely, we may consider it. However, your primary responsibility remains observation and learning. Do not attempt to engage targets independently under any circumstances. Understood, Commander. They began final preparations for planetary insertion. Netherworld Prime orbited a dying star, its surface racked by gravitational storms and electromagnetic chaos that made conventional scanning almost impossible. The planet's ecosystem had evolved under these extreme conditions, producing life forms that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. As they loaded equipment into the drop ship, Zarathek noticed Marcus checking and rechecking his gear with methodical precision. His movements were economical and purposeful, suggesting actual training rather than amateur enthusiasm. The equipment itself might appear primitive, but he handled it with obvious competence. Your weapons appear rather basic, Veltar observed, watching Marcus assemble what looked like a modified projectile launcher. Are human manufacturing capabilities limited compared to other species? Marcus looked up from his work. Different design philosophy, mostly. Human weapons tend to emphasize mechanical reliability over energy efficiency. This rifle fires electromagnetically accelerated projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. It might not match your plasma cannon for raw power, but it functions regardless of local energy fields or electromagnetic interference. The implication was clear, and Zarathek felt a flicker of unease. In the electromagnetic storms of Netherworld Prime, energy weapons could indeed become unreliable. She had planned to rely primarily on quantum entanglement nets and temporal displacement fields, but those systems were also vulnerable to interference. Primitive does not necessarily mean inferior, she admitted grudgingly, though projectile weapons remain ineffective against phased targets. Against fully phased targets, yes, Marcus agreed. But if electromagnetic interference forces partial materialization, physical projectiles become viable again. Plus, even energy beings need to interact with normal matter periodically, or they couldn't affect our reality. HFY Chona's tongue flickered thoughtfully. He demonstrates surprising understanding of dimensional mechanics for a supposed trainee. Human educational systems emphasize theoretical knowledge, Marcus explained. We tend to overanalyze situations before acting. It's probably an evolutionary adaptation to compensate for our physical limitations. Zarathek found herself increasingly curious about this human's background. Most species that joined the guild did, so to prove their combat prowess or hunting skills. Humans generally applied for political reasons, seeking to establish their species' credibility within galactic society. But Marcus seemed genuinely interested in the technical aspects of their profession. What motivated you to join the Hunters Guild? She asked as they completed final checks. Marcus paused thoughtfully. Humans have a saying about learning from those who are better than you. The guild represents the finest hunters in the galaxy. If I want to understand how to survive in dangerous environments, this seems like the logical place to learn. And if you die in the process, then I wasn't as ready as I thought, he replied matter-of-factly. But dying because you avoided challenges is just slower suicide. The response surprised her with its directness. Most guild applicants spoke of glory, honor, or proving their worth. This human seemed motivated by simple curiosity and pragmatic self-improvement. The dropship systems engaged, and they began their descent toward Netherworld Prime's chaotic surface. Through the viewports, the planet appeared as a swirling mass of electromagnetic storms and gravitational distortions that made visual observation nearly impossible. Scanning systems are compromised, reported their pilot, a cybernetic organism designed specifically for navigation in hostile environments. I can get you to the designated landing zone, but extraction will require manual beacon activation. Zarathek acknowledged the standard warning. Guild missions to Netherworld Prime always included this risk. The planet's environment made remote tracking impossible, leaving teams dependent on their own resources for survival and extraction. As they descended through the atmosphere, electromagnetic discharges played across their hull like liquid lightning. The ship's systems fluctuated wildly, and even their advanced shielding struggled against the planet's hostile environment. Marcus watched the display readings with obvious fascination rather than concern. The electromagnetic activity is orders of magnitude stronger than theoretical models suggested, he observed. If this affects Void Stalker phasing capabilities, they might be forced to remain mostly materialized while on planet. An interesting hypothesis, Veltar acknowledged, though we should be cautious about assumptions based on limited data. Agreed, Marcus said, but it does suggest we might want to modify our tactical approach based on local conditions rather than relying entirely on standard protocols. Zarathek found his adaptability noteworthy. Most hunters, even experienced ones, preferred familiar tactics over improvisation. The humans seemed comfortable with uncertainty and changing variables. The ship touched down on what appeared to be relatively stable ground, though the definition of stability on Netherworld Prime was largely academic. Everything on the planet existed in constant flux, from the crystalline formations that shifted like slow liquid to the atmospheric composition that changed from moment to moment. "Welcome to Netherworld Prime," Zarathek announced as they prepared to disembark. "Remember that everything here can and probably will try to kill you. Stay alert, follow orders, and perhaps some of us will live to see extraction." As they stepped onto the planet's surface, Marcus looked around with obvious wonder rather than fear. The landscape was simultaneously beautiful and terrifying, with crystalline spires that sang in harmonious tones while predatory plants tracked their movement with obvious hunger. "It's amazing," he murmured, checking his equipment readings. "The entire ecosystem exists in a state of constant adaptation. Evolution in real time." Zarathek was beginning to suspect that this human might be more interesting than she had initially assumed. Whether that would prove beneficial or catastrophic remained to be seen. 3 hours into their trek across Netherworld Prime's shifting terrain, Zarathek was forced to admit that the human was proving less of a liability than expected. While her other team members struggled with the planet's constantly changing environment, Marcus had adapted with surprising ease to the unstable conditions. When Brakthal's heavy exoskeleton began sinking into what appeared to be solid crystalline ground, Marcus had quickly identified the subsurface resonance patterns that indicated structural instability. When HFY's heat sensors were overwhelmed by the planet's thermal chaos, Marcus had suggested using seismic vibrations to track movement instead. Most remarkably, when their quantum entanglement nets began malfunctioning due to dimensional interference, Marcus had anticipated the problem and begun preparing alternative tracking methods. "Your electromagnetic pulse grenades," Veltar observed as they paused to recalibrate their equipment. "They appear more sophisticated than initial examination suggested." Marcus looked up from where he was adjusting the devices. "Basic human engineering philosophy. Make things look simple, but build them to handle complex situations. These are designed to function as area denial weapons, electromagnetic pulse generators, or gravitational anchor points, depending on how they're configured." Zarathek studied the devices with renewed interest. Her initial assessment had dismissed them as primitive explosive charges, but closer examination revealed intricate circuitry and what appeared to be quantum stabilization matrices built into seemingly simple casings. "Gravitational anchor points?" she inquired. "For dealing with enemies that exist partially outside normal space-time," Marcus explained, making final adjustments to the grenades. "The theory is that locally reinforcing gravitational fields can force dimensional entities to maintain consistent materialization. It's never been tested against Void Stalkers specifically, but the mathematics are sound." SYPH's serpentine form coiled with interest. "Human mathematics have proven surprisingly accurate in previous applications," she acknowledged. "Though your species lacks our computational speed, you demonstrate unusual creativity in problem-solving approaches. We call it thinking outside the box." Marcus replied with a slight smile. "When you can't overpower a problem, you have to find ways around it." Their conversation was interrupted by a low harmonic vibration that seemed to emanate from the crystalline formations around them. The sound was subtly wrong, creating a sense of unease that went beyond normal danger responses. Void Stalker sign, Zarathek announced, her combat systems automatically engaging. All hunters to combat readiness. Human, maintain safe distance, and prepare for extraction if necessary. Marcus nodded and moved toward the designated observation position, though Zarathek noticed he continued monitoring his equipment readings rather than simply retreating. His electromagnetic sensors were detecting patterns that their more sophisticated instruments had missed. "Commander," he called quietly, "I'm reading dimensional phase fluctuations approximately 200 meters northeast. The signature suggests something large transitioning between normal space and hyperspace." Veltar consulted his own sensors. "I'm detecting nothing on standard instruments. The electromagnetic interference is masking quantum signatures," Marcus explained. "But dimensional phasing creates characteristic disruptions in local magnetic fields. My equipment is specifically designed to detect those patterns." Zarathek found herself in the unusual position of relying on information from the team member she had expected to be most useless. The irony was not lost on her, but professional survival took precedence over personal pride. "Can you maintain tracking at this distance?" Marcus checked his instruments again. "Yes, but the signature is moving erratically. It seems to be having difficulty maintaining consistent phase relationships. The planet's electromagnetic activity might be interfering with its abilities more than expected." This matched his earlier theoretical predictions, though Zarathek remained cautious about drawing definitive conclusions. Void Stalkers were notoriously deceptive, and apparent weakness could easily be bait for an elaborate trap. "Standard approach protocol," she ordered her team. "Veltar and SYPH will attempt flanking positions while Brakthal and I establish primary firing positions. If the target is indeed struggling with phase maintenance, we may have an opportunity for conventional engagement." As her hunters moved into position, Zarathek kept one compound eye on Marcus. Despite his relegation to observer status, he was clearly tracking multiple variables and making continuous adjustments to his equipment. His movements were purposeful and controlled, suggesting someone comfortable with dangerous situations rather than a nervous trainee. The dimensional fluctuations intensified, and through her tactical display, Zarathek caught her first glimpse of their quarry. The Void Stalker was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure, its form shifting between solid matter and translucent energy as it struggled to maintain coherent existence in the planet's chaotic electromagnetic environment. "It's beautiful," Marcus whispered from his position, apparently forgetting communication protocol in his fascination. Zarathek was surprised by the comment. Most species expressed fear, aggression, or professional focus when encountering Class X prey. Aesthetic appreciation was unusual and suggested an unusual mindset. "Target acquired," reported Veltar from his flanking position. "Phase coherence appears unstable. Recommend immediate engagement." Zarathek raised her plasma rifle, preparing to initiate the attack sequence. The Void Stalker seemed unaware of their presence, its attention focused on maintaining dimensional stability in a hostile environment. Suddenly, Marcus's voice cut through their communications. "Wait, 3 more signatures converging on our position from multiple vectors. I think we've stumbled into a hunting pack." The revelation changed everything. Void Stalkers occasionally operated in groups when hunting particularly dangerous prey, but encounters with multiple creatures simultaneously were usually fatal for hunting teams. Zarathek's tactical display updated as her sensors finally detected the additional threats Marcus had identified. "Confirm multiple hostiles," she announced grimly. "All hunters withdraw to defensive positions. Prepare for coordinated assault." What followed was unlike any engagement in her considerable experience. The Void Stalkers moved with fluid coordination, their forms phasing in and out of normal space in patterns that should have made targeting impossible. However, their abilities were clearly compromised by the planet's electromagnetic interference, forcing them to remain partially materialized longer than usual. Marcus's voice came across their communications, calm and analytical despite the chaos. "The electromagnetic pulse grenades can be configured for sequential detonation. If timed correctly, we can create cascading interference that forces them to remain fully materialized for several seconds." "Do it," Zarathek ordered without hesitation. Professional pride was irrelevant when facing extinction. Marcus began activating his devices with practiced precision, creating a complex pattern of electromagnetic fields that interacted with both the planet's natural energy and the Void Stalker's dimensional abilities. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The creature's phase shifting became increasingly erratic before failing entirely, leaving them trapped in normal space-time. Now, Zarathek commanded, and her hunters opened fire with coordinated precision. The battle that followed was brutal but decisive. Stripped of their dimensional advantages, the Void Stalkers were still formidable opponents, but they were no longer invincible. Brakthol's heavy weapons tore through their materialized forms while Veltar and Sypyhona exploited their force predictability to land killing strikes. When the electromagnetic interference finally dissipated, Void Stalker corpses lay scattered across the crystalline landscape. It was an unprecedented success for a hunting team of their size, and the implications were staggering. "Explain your tactics," Zarathek demanded as they examined the aftermath. "How did you predict their coordination patterns?" Marcus looked somewhat embarrassed by the attention. Human military doctrine emphasizes pattern recognition and adaptive response. When I realized the electromagnetic interference was affecting their abilities, I started monitoring how they compensated for the limitations. Pack hunters always develop coordination signals, even when those signals have to be modified for environmental factors. And the electromagnetic pulse configuration? Trial and error, mostly, he admitted. I had theoretical models for interfering with dimensional phasing, but I've never tested them against actual Void Stalkers. I just try to create overlapping interference patterns that would reinforce each other rather than canceling out. Sypyhona examined one of the creatures with professional interest. The dimensional anchor effect appears to have been more successful than standard quantum entanglement nets. How did you achieve superior binding strength with apparently inferior technology? Different approach entirely, Marcus explained. Instead of trying to trap them in our reality, I reinforced local space-time to make dimensional shifting require exponentially more energy. They exhausted themselves trying to phase rather than being actively prevented from doing so. Veltar flexed his claws thoughtfully. Your species approaches problems from unexpected angles. It is effective. The admission carried weight coming from Kytherian warrior. Their species was renowned for tactical excellence, and they rarely acknowledged superior strategy from other races. Brakthol was examining Marcus's remaining equipment with obvious curiosity. Your projectile launcher performed admirably during combat. The electromagnetic acceleration system maintained consistent function despite local interference. Humans learned early that fancy technology fails when you need it most, Marcus replied. Simple, robust systems with redundant backups tend to work better in crisis situations. Zarathek found herself reconsidering fundamental assumptions about human capabilities. The success of this engagement had depended entirely on tactics and equipment that her sophisticated sensors had initially dismissed as primitive. The lesson was both humbling and instructive. We will modify our approach for the remaining mission objectives, she decided. Human, your observatory role is rescinded. You will participate as a full team member with input on tactical decisions. Marcus seemed surprised by the promotion. I appreciate the confidence, Commander, but I'm still just a trainee. I got lucky with some theoretical knowledge that happened to apply to an unusual situation. Luck is preparation meeting opportunity, Zarathek replied, quoting an old hunter saying. You prepare more thoroughly than any of us anticipated, and you recognized opportunities we missed entirely. That demonstrates competence, not luck. As they continued deeper in a Netherworld Prime's hazardous terrain, the team dynamic began shifting in subtle ways. Rather than protecting a liability, they were now incorporating a new member whose unconventional approaches had already proven valuable. The planet's environment continued to challenge them at every turn. Gravitational anomalies that could crush even reinforced exoskeletons appeared without warning. Predatory crystal formations that could slice through molecular-level armor hunting parties through subsonic vibrations. Atmospheric compositions that changed faster than life support systems could adapt. Marcus proved surprisingly adept at navigating these hazards. His approach was methodical and cautious, using his sensors to identify danger patterns before they became immediately threatening. Where her other hunters relied on speed and firepower to overcome obstacles, Marcus anticipated problems and avoided them entirely. Your species demonstrates unusual survival instincts, observed SYPHONA as they paused to rest in the shelter of a stable crystal formation. Most predatory races rely on aggressive responses to threats. Humans appear to prioritize threat avoidance. We're not apex predators by nature, Marcus acknowledged. Humans succeeded through persistence, cooperation, and tool-making rather than individual combat superiority. We learned to solve problems rather than fight them. Yet you joined an organization dedicated to hunting the galaxy's most dangerous creatures, Veltar pointed out. This suggests either poor decision-making or unusual motivations. Marcus smiled at the observation. Both, probably. But humans are also curious about things that could kill us. We have a saying about curiosity and cats, but we do it anyway. Curiosity and cats? Brackthol rumbled in confusion. Old human expression about dangerous curiosity, Marcus explained. Cats were small predatory animals on our homeworld, and they had a reputation for getting into situations that killed them through excessive curiosity. Humans do the same thing, just with bigger consequences. Zarathek found this self-deprecating humor intriguing. Most guild hunters took themselves very seriously, treating their profession with almost religious dedication. Marcus seemed to approach even life-threatening situations with a kind of analytical playfulness that was entirely foreign to her experience. "Do you fear death?" she asked directly. Marcus considered the question seriously. Not exactly fear, more like strong preference for continued existence. Death would interfere with learning new things, and there's always something interesting to learn. The answer was purely human in its priorities, and Zarathek was beginning to understand that this might represent a significant advantage rather than a limitation. Fear and aggression were powerful motivators, but they could also lead to poor decisions under pressure. Marcus's curiosity-driven approach seemed to promote clear thinking even in dangerous situations. Their rest was interrupted by seismic vibrations that suggested something large moving beneath the planet's surface. The tremors were rhythmic and purposeful, indicating intelligence rather than natural geological activity. Subterranean movement, reported SYPHONA, tasting the air with growing concern. Large, multiple entities, approaching rapidly. Marcus checked his instruments and frowned. "I'm reading massive dimensional distortions underground. Whatever's coming, it's not entirely native to our reality." The implications were ominous. Their mission briefing had mentioned the possibility of encountering Apex-level threats beyond their primary target, but actual contact with such entities was considered unlikely. "Recommendations?" Zarathek asked her team, acknowledging Marcus as an equal participant. "Immediate withdrawal to higher ground," suggested Veltar. "Unknown quantities require careful assessment before engagement." "Agreed, but we need more information," countered Brackthol. "Fighting blindly is usually fatal, but so is running from unknown enemies." Marcus was studying his sensor readings intently. "The dimensional signatures are unlike anything in guild databases," he reported. "But they're similar to the Void Stalker patterns, just orders of magnitude stronger. I think we might be dealing with their natural predators." The silence that followed was heavy with implications. If Marcus was correct, they were about to encounter creatures that hunted Void Stalkers as prey. The food chain implications were staggering. The ground beneath them erupted in a shower of crystalline fragments as something massive breached the surface. What emerged defied every classification system Zarathek knew. The creature was roughly cylindrical, easily 50 meters in length, with what appeared to be segments that existed in different dimensional phases simultaneously. Some sections were solid enough to displace matter, while others flickered between states of existence like living shadows. "Void Leviathan," Marcus breathed, consulting his portable database with rapid keystrokes. "Theoretical apex predator." Guild files list them as unconfirmed legend. Apparently the legends were wrong. The creature's attention seemed focused on the Void Stalker remains, its form rippling through dimensional space as it investigated the carnage. Multiple sensory appendages emerged from various segments, scanning the area with obvious intelligence. "It's examining our kill," observed SYPHONA, her heat sensors struggling to maintain coherent readings on the partially phased entity. "We may have inadvertently attracted a scavenger, or triggered territorial behavior," added Veltar grimly. Many apex species consider successful hunters in their domain as potential threats. Zarathek was calculating tactical options when Marcus spoke up quietly. It's not showing aggressive posture. The dimensional fluctuations suggest curiosity rather than hostility. I think it's trying to understand how we managed to kill 4 Void Stalkers. The distinction was crucial, but difficult to verify. Void Leviathans existed so far outside normal space-time that conventional behavior analysis was nearly impossible. Even determining their cognitive capabilities required guesswork based on limited theoretical frameworks. Recommendations? Zarathek asked, though she suspected their options were severely limited regardless of the creature's intentions. Standard protocol would be immediate withdrawal, Brackthal rumbled, though his tone suggested skepticism about their chances. However, if the entity can phase through dimensions at will, retreat may be impossible. Marcus was monitoring something on his instruments, his expression thoughtful rather than fearful. The electromagnetic interference patterns are different now. The Leviathan seems to be stabilizing local space-time rather than disrupting it. Almost like it's trying to make communication possible. Communication? Veltar's claws extended reflexively. Class X predators do not typically engage in dialogue with prey species. Maybe we're not prey, Marcus suggested quietly. Think about it. We just demonstrated the ability to kill Void Stalkers using novel tactics. From an apex predator's perspective, that might make us interesting rather than threatening. The theory was unprecedented, but not impossible. Guild records contained scattered references to extremely advanced species that showed curiosity about innovative hunting techniques, though actual contact remained largely theoretical. Zarathek made a command decision that went against every instinct her training had developed. We maintain position and monitor for aggressive indicators. If the entity shows hostile intent, we implement emergency extraction protocols. If it remains non-threatening, we observe and gather intelligence. The Void Leviathan completed its examination of the battlefield and turned its attention toward their position. Multiple sensory appendages focused on them with obvious purpose, though the creature maintained what appeared to be a respectful distance. It's scanning us, reported SYPHona, her sensors detecting complex energy patterns playing across their position. The scanning methods are beyond our technological understanding, but they appear non-invasive. Marcus checked his electromagnetic sensors and frowned. The dimensional anchor points for my grenades are still active. I think it's analyzing how we managed to force Void Stalkers into normal space-time. The scanning patterns are focused on the anchor positions rather than on us directly. You believe it is studying our tactics? Zarathek asked. It's possible. If Void Leviathans are natural predators of Void Stalkers, they might be interested in more efficient hunting methods. What we accomplished here represents a significant tactical breakthrough. The implications were staggering. If Marcus was correct, they were witnessing the first recorded instance of an apex-level predator showing scientific curiosity about lower-tier hunting techniques. The Guild would be fascinated by such intelligence, assuming they survived to report it. The Leviathan's scanning intensified, and Zarathek felt a peculiar tingling sensation that seemed to bypass her normal sensory apparatus entirely. The creature was attempting some form of direct communication that operated outside conventional electromagnetic or quantum channels. Marcus suddenly straightened, his expression shifting to intense concentration. I'm receiving something, he reported. Not word exactly, but concepts, mathematical relationships. I think it's trying to understand our dimensional interference calculations. You can interpret its communication? Veltar asked with obvious amazement. Partially. Human brains process mathematical concepts differently than most species. We tend to visualize abstract relationships as spatial constructs, which might be compatible with how dimensional entities think. Zarathek watched as Marcus began making adjustments to his equipment, apparently responding to the creature's inquiries. The exchange was fascinating and terrifying in equal measure. First contact with apex-level intelligence was supposed to require massive guild resources and careful diplomatic protocols, not happen accidentally during routine hunting missions. What is it asking? She inquired. Marcus paused his work to translate. It wants to understand how we created stable gravitational anchors without massive energy expenditure. Apparently, its species uses brute force dimensional manipulation that requires enormous power. Our approach is more elegant from a mathematical perspective. And you can explain this? I'm trying to. Human mathematics use efficiency principles that don't translate easily, but the underlying physics should be universal. The communication continued for several minutes, with Marcus apparently providing detailed explanations of human engineering philosophy, while the Leviathan shared glimpses of its own vast understanding of dimensional mechanics. Zarathek found herself witnessing an unprecedented exchange of scientific knowledge between species separated by millions of years of evolution. "It's offering something in return," Marcus announced suddenly. "Information about Class X hunting grounds and predator behavior patterns. Apparently, there are hunting opportunities on Netherworld Prime that guild databases don't mention." Zarathek felt her professional instincts warring with caution. Additional intelligence about Class X prey was invaluable, but accepting information from unknown entities carried significant risks. What kind of hunting opportunities? Marcus consulted his equipment as new data flowed through their connection. Ultra-class entities, beyond anything the guild has cataloged. Creatures that exist primarily in hyperspace, but maintain physical anchor points in our reality. Hunting them requires specialized techniques that— He paused, processing the information. "The humans might be uniquely suited for." Explain. Human engineering philosophy emphasizes minimum energy solutions to complex problems. Ultra-class entities apparently require similar approaches because conventional firepower simply passes through their non-corporeal forms without causing damage. You have to attack their mathematical existence rather than their physical manifestation. The concept was beyond Zarathek's immediate understanding, but she recognized its potential significance. If humans possessed innate advantages for hunting previously unknown classes of prey, it would revolutionize the guild's assessment of their species' capabilities. "Is this information reliable?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, apparently considering the question carefully. The mathematics check out. The Leviathan isn't just sharing data. It's providing theoretical frameworks that explain why certain approaches work. This isn't guesswork or speculation. It's proven knowledge from millions of years of apex-level hunting experience. Brackthal rumbled thoughtfully. Ultra-class prey would represent unprecedented challenges and rewards. Guild classification systems do not extend beyond Class X because nothing more dangerous was thought to exist. Perhaps, suggested Veltar, nothing more dangerous was thought to be huntable by lower-tier species. SYPHONA coiled with interest. If humans possess unique capabilities for hunting ultra-class entities, it would explain their inclusion in guild operations despite apparent physical limitations. Zarathek found herself facing a decision that could reshape her understanding of both human capabilities and guild priorities. The information being offered represented knowledge that could advance hunting science by centuries, but accepting it would acknowledge humans as equals rather than liability trainees. Professional advancement won over personal pride. Accept the information exchange, she decided. Marcus informed the entity that we appreciate its knowledge sharing and request whatever tactical intelligence it can provide about ultra-class hunting. The communication continued with increasing complexity as the Leviathan shared detailed information about prey species that existed beyond normal guild classification systems. Ultra-class entities apparently included creatures that could manipulate reality at fundamental levels, beings composed entirely of organized energy, and predators that existed across multiple dimensional planes simultaneously. The hunting techniques are unlike anything in guild training, Marcus reported as he processed the data stream. Ultra-class prey requires hunters to think in terms of mathematical warfare rather than physical combat. You attack their logical structure rather than their material existence. Can such techniques be learned? Asked Zarathek. Theoretically, yes, but it requires a completely different mindset from conventional hunting. Instead of overwhelming prey with superior firepower, you have to outthink them on fundamental levels. Find logical contradictions in their existence, and exploit those weaknesses. Veltar's claws extended thoughtfully. Human cognitive patterns may indeed provide advantages for such approaches. Your species demonstrates unusual capability for abstract problem-solving. The information exchange was interrupted by seismic disturbances that suggested additional large entities approaching their position. The Void Leviathan's dimensional fluctuations intensified, and its sensory appendages began scanning the surrounding area with obvious concern. Multiple contacts, Marcus reported, consulting his instruments. Similar dimensional signatures to our friend here, but smaller and showing different behavioral patterns. I think we have company. 3 more void leviathans breached the surface at various points around their position, their forms rippling through dimensional space as they examined the scene. The first creature's communication patterns changed dramatically, shifting from scientific curiosity to what appeared to be rapid information sharing with its fellows. Pack behavior, suggested SYPHONA. More like academic conference. Marcus corrected, monitoring the complex communication patterns. They're sharing our dimensional interference data and discussing its implications. I think our hunting success has attracted significant scientific interest. Zarathek felt increasingly out of her depth. First contact protocols with Class X entities were theoretical at best, and dealing with multiple Apex-level intelligences simultaneously was entirely outside guild experience. Are we in immediate danger? Marcus listened to the communication patterns for several moments before responding. I don't think so. The discussion seems focused on hunting methodology rather than territorial concerns. They appear to view us as colleagues rather than competitors or prey. Colleagues, Brackthol rumbled with obvious surprise. Think about it from their perspective, Marcus explained. We just demonstrated novel techniques for hunting prey they consider challenging. From an apex predator's viewpoint, that makes us interesting rather than threatening. We're not competing for the same resources, and we're sharing valuable information freely. The concept required significant mental adjustment. Zarathek had never considered the possibility that Class X entities might view guild hunters as professional peers rather than inferior beings. The implications for future guild operations were staggering. One of the new arrivals directed its attention toward their position, and Marcus suddenly stiffened with concentration. This one wants to demonstrate something, he reported. A hunting technique for ultra-class prey. I think we're about to witness apex-level predation in action. Zarathek felt a mixture of excitement and terror at the prospect. Observing actual hunting techniques from creatures that existed beyond guild classification systems would provide unprecedented intelligence, but it also represented exposure to forces that could easily prove fatal to lower-tier species. Maintain safe distance and observe, she ordered. This may be our only opportunity to witness ultra-class hunting methods. The Void Leviathan began a process that defied easy description. Its form shifted through multiple dimensional states while generating complex electromagnetic patterns that seemed to fold space-time around specific coordinates. Reality became visibly unstable in a localized area, with gravitational fields fluctuating wildly and the fundamental constants of physics appearing to shift from moment to moment. It's creating a logic trap. Marcus breathed, his instruments detecting patterns beyond normal comprehension. Not attacking anything physical, but establishing mathematical contradictions that force dimensional entities to choose between existent states. Whatever falls into that area has to resolve the logical paradox or cease to exist entirely. And if they resolve it incorrectly, then they delete themselves from reality rather than being killed by external forces. The demonstration was brief, but effective. Something invisible responded to the trap, and for a moment the air itself seemed to scream with dimensional stress before resolving into empty silence. Whatever had been caught in the logic trap was simply gone, removed from existence without leaving physical remains. Ultra-class hunting, Marcus explained quietly. You don't kill the prey. You prove it was never logically possible for them to exist in the first place. Silence. Even Zarathek, with decades of experience hunting the galaxy's most dangerous creatures, felt humbled by the demonstration of apex-level predation techniques that operated beyond conventional understanding of combat. Marcus was furiously taking notes, his instruments having recorded dimensional data that might prove invaluable for future guild operations. The mathematical frameworks underlying the logic trap were incredibly complex, but he seemed confident that human analytical methods could eventually decode them. The Leviathans are preparing to leave, he reported as the massive creatures began phase shifting toward departure. But they're offering us coordinates for ultra-class hunting grounds. Apparently, there are stable populations of such entities in specific regions of the galaxy. Zarathek felt torn between professional opportunity and tactical caution. Ultra-class hunting represented advancement potential beyond anything the guild had previously imagined, but it also meant engaging with forces that could literally erase hunters from existence if approached incorrectly. What are the recommended preparation requirements? Marcus consulted the data being transmitted. Extensive mathematical training. Understanding of dimensional physics at theoretical levels. Equipment designed for logic-based warfare rather than physical combat. And he paused, looking uncertain. They're suggesting that human cognitive patterns provide optimal foundation for learning ultra-class hunting techniques. Elaborate. Human mathematics emphasize elegant solutions over brute force approaches. We solve complex problems by finding unexpected relationships and exploiting logical shortcuts. Apparently, this mirrors the thought processes required for mathematical warfare against ultra-class entities. Veltar examined his own weapons thoughtfully. Traditional guild equipment would be useless against prey that exists primarily as organized information rather than physical matter. Not useless, Marcus corrected, but it would require completely different applications. Energy weapons could theoretically disrupt information structures if properly configured. Physical projectiles could anchor probability equations in normal space-time. The principles remain valid, but the implementation methods need fundamental revision. SYPHONA tasted the air, apparently detecting complex chemical signatures left by the Leviathan's dimensional manipulations. The knowledge they have shared represents centuries of advancement beyond current guild capabilities. If we can successfully apply these techniques, it would revolutionize hunting methodology. If we survive the learning process, added Brackthal pragmatically. Logic-based warfare sounds extremely unforgiving of tactical errors. The Void Leviathans completed their departure preparations, their massive forms beginning to phase out of normal reality. Before disappearing entirely, the lead creature directed one final communication toward Marcus. Final data transfer. He reported his equipment receiving the last burst of information. Mathematical frameworks for basic ultra-class detection and engagement protocols. They're giving us enough knowledge to attempt our first ultra-class hunt. Zarathek felt the weight of command decision settling on her shoulders. The mission parameters had evolved far beyond their original Void Stalker hunting assignment. They were now in possession of intelligence that could reshape the Guild's entire operational framework, but acting on that intelligence would require risks that went beyond normal mission protocols. Assessment of current team readiness for ultra-class engagement. Marcus consulted the transmitted protocols carefully. We have the theoretical knowledge now, and my equipment can be reconfigured for mathematical warfare applications. The team's combat experience provides foundation skills that should translate. But we would essentially be conducting live-fire testing of completely untested tactics. In other words, Veltar observed, we would be gambling our lives on theoretical mathematics and alien advice. Pretty much, Marcus agreed cheerfully. Though the theoretical mathematics are remarkably elegant, and the alien advice comes from creatures with millions of years of experience hunting things we didn't know existed until today. Zarathek found his casual attitude toward existential risk both admirable and slightly disturbing. Humans seemed capable of treating potentially fatal situations as interesting puzzles rather than life-threatening crises. Locate the nearest ultra-class hunting ground, she decided. We will conduct preliminary reconnaissance and assess whether immediate engagement is feasible. Marcus began processing the coordinates provided by the Leviathans. Approximately 12 kilometers northeast. The site appears to be a dimensional convergence point where multiple reality layers intersect. Ultra-class entities use such locations for feeding, apparently. What do ultra-class entities consume? Information. Specifically, organized information that represents lower dimensional existence. They consume the mathematical frameworks that define physical reality in localized areas. Marcus paused as the implication sank in. We would essentially be hunting creatures that eat the logical foundation of our existence. Brakthal's massive frame shuddered slightly. Such entities could theoretically erase entire star systems by consuming the mathematical relationships that define matter and energy interactions. Which is why they're classified as ultra-class, Marcus confirmed. They represent threats to reality itself, rather than just individual hunters or civilizations. SYPHONA coiled thoughtfully. If such creatures exist, why have they not consumed significant portions of the galaxy already? Marcus consulted the Leviathan data. Apparently, they're limited by conservation laws that operate across dimensional boundaries. Consuming reality requires energy expenditure that scales exponentially with the complexity of targeted systems. Individual hunters are energetically affordable targets. Entire star systems would bankrupt most ultra-class entities. The explanation was both reassuring and terrifying. Ultra-class entities were constrained by cosmic economics, but they remained capable of casual destruction on scales that conventional weapons could never match. As they traveled toward the dimensional convergence point, Zarathek found herself reassessing everything she thought she understood about guild operations and galactic predator hierarchies. The discovery of ultra-class entities implied threat levels that went beyond anything in existing defensive planning. "Marcus," she asked as they navigated increasingly unstable terrain, "what are the long-term implications if humans prove uniquely capable of hunting ultra-class prey?" Marcus considered the question seriously. Complete revision of human status within galactic civilization. If we're the only species that can effectively hunt reality-threatening predators, it would make us invaluable rather than marginally useful. The Guild would probably restructure their entire organization around human tactical approaches. And the consequences for human society? Massive influx of advanced technology and galactic resources in exchange for hunting services. Rapid advancement from emerging civilization to major galactic power. Probably transformation into a primarily military culture focused on training ultra-class hunters. Veltar flexed his claws thoughtfully. Such advancement could prove beneficial or catastrophic, depending on human cultural adaptation to suddenly acquired power. Humans have a mixed track record with power, Marcus admitted. We tend to be simultaneously innovative and destructive. Giving us access to reality manipulation technology would be either brilliant or disastrous with very little middle ground. The honesty of his assessment impressed Zarathek. Most species emphasize their positive qualities when discussing potential advancement opportunities. Marcus seemed comfortable acknowledging both human capabilities and limitations. They reached the dimensional convergence point as Netherworld Prime's primary star began setting, casting the landscape in eerie shadows that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The convergence point itself was visible as a location where reality appeared unstable, with gravitational fields fluctuating wildly and atmospheric composition shifting constantly. Multiple ultra-class signatures, Marcus reported, his reconfigured instruments detecting patterns that conventional sensors could not perceive. At least 3 entities feeding on local information structures. They appear unaware of our presence. Zarathek studied the tactical situation carefully. Ultra-class hunting required approaches that went against every instinct her training had developed. Instead of positioning for optimal firepower application, they needed to establish mathematical frameworks that could trap entities existing primarily as organized information. Preliminary engagement protocols? Marcus began deploying his reconfigured equipment in patterns specified by the Leviathan data. We create logical paradoxes in the local information matrix that force the entities to resolve contradictions in their existence equations. If successful, they either retreat to avoid the paradox or delete themselves by choosing incorrect resolution paths. And if unsuccessful, they delete us by proving we were never mathematically valid entities in the first place. Braktul rumbled nervously. Stakes appear significantly higher than conventional hunting. Everything about this is higher stakes, Marcus agreed, making final adjustments to his equipment. We're essentially engaging in philosophical warfare with creatures that exist as living mathematics. Victory requires outthinking them on fundamental levels rather than overpowering them. SYPHONA monitored the ultra-class entities with obvious fascination. Their feeding patterns appear systematic rather than random. They are selectively consuming specific types of information while leaving others intact. That might be important, Marcus noted. If they're selective about what they consume, it suggests they follow logical rules we might be able to exploit. Random destruction would be much harder to counter than systematic behavior. Zarathek positioned her team according to the mathematical warfare protocols, though the tactical arrangements felt alien compared to conventional hunting formations. Instead of overlapping fields of fire, they were establishing overlapping logical frameworks that would theoretically trap ultra-class entities in unsolvable paradoxes. "Initiate engagement on my mark," she commanded, though the entire concept of engagement felt surreal when applied to mathematical warfare. Marcus activated his reconfigured electromagnetic pulse generators, but instead of creating simple interference, they began establishing complex logical structures in local space-time. The effect was subtle but profound, creating areas where conventional physics became inconsistent and mathematical relationships developed internal contradictions. The ultra-class entities responded immediately, their feeding behavior shifting from systematic consumption to apparent confusion as they encountered logical paradoxes in the information matrix they were attempting to process. "It's working," Marcus reported with obvious excitement. "They're trying to resolve the paradoxes, but each resolution attempt creates new contradictions. They're getting trapped in recursive logical loops." One entity attempted to retreat, phase-shifting toward higher-dimensional space to escape the logical trap. Marcus quickly adjusted his equipment to extend the paradox in a hyperspace, forcing the creature to either accept logical contradiction or cease to exist entirely. The entity chose non-existence over logical inconsistency, simply vanishing from reality as its mathematical framework collapsed under the weight of unresolvable paradox. First confirmed ultra-class elimination, Zarathek announced with professional satisfaction and existential awe. They had just deleted a creature from reality through mathematical warfare, using techniques that operated beyond conventional understanding of combat. The remaining entities were adapting to their tactics, beginning to generate counter-paradoxes that threatened to turn the logical traps against the hunters themselves. Ultra-class warfare was proving to be intensely dynamic, requiring constant tactical evolution rather than fixed strategies. "They're learning," Marcus observed, rapidly reconfiguring his equipment to address new challenges. Ultra-class intelligence operates on scales that make adaptation extremely rapid. We need to stay ahead of their countermeasures. Veltar's weapons were useless in mathematical warfare, but his tactical training remained relevant for coordinating team movements and monitoring threat patterns. Recommend continuous tactical evolution. Fixed strategies will be countered quickly. The second entity attempted a direct logical assault, generating paradoxes designed to prove the hunting team could not mathematically exist in their current configuration. Marcus countered by creating meta-paradoxes that questioned the validity of the creature's own logical framework. The resulting exchange was unlike any combat Zarathek had ever witnessed. Instead of physical violence, two mathematical intelligences engaged in philosophical warfare that operated at speeds approaching significant fractions of light. Reality itself became the battlefield as competing logical systems attempted to establish dominance. Marcus emerged victorious when he successfully demonstrated that the entity's existence violated its own stated axioms about information consumption. Faced with logical self-contradiction, the creature deleted itself rather than accept fundamental inconsistency in its nature. "Two down," he announced, though the strain of mathematical warfare was becoming apparent. "One more to go, but my equipment is overheating from the logical processing load." The final entity had observed the defeats of its fellows and was adapting accordingly, generating defensive paradoxes that protected its core logical structure while probing for weaknesses in the hunter's mathematical frameworks. Zarathek realized that conventional leadership approaches were inadequate for ultra-class warfare. Mathematical combat required understanding that went beyond her tactical training, making Marcus the effective field commander despite his nominal trainee status. "Recommendations for final engagement?" she asked, formally acknowledging his expertise. Marcus studied the entity's defensive patterns carefully. It's protecting itself through recursive logical structures that make direct paradox attacks ineffective. "We need to attack the recursion itself rather than the protected core." "Explain." "Create a meta-meta paradox that questions the validity of recursive protection as a logical concept. If successful, it will force the entity to choose between maintaining its defenses or maintaining logical consistency. Either choice results in vulnerability." The approach required equipment capabilities that pushed Marcus's reconfigured systems beyond their design limits. But mathematical warfare demanded adaptation beyond conventional boundaries. Marcus pushed his reconfigured equipment beyond safe operational parameters, generating meta-meta paradoxes that challenged the fundamental concept of recursive logical protection. The strain on his systems was enormous, with components overheating and quantum matrices destabilizing under the processing load required for mathematical warfare at ultra-class levels. The final entity responded with desperate innovation, attempting to create logical structures so complex that analyzing them would overwhelm any finite intelligence. It was essentially trying to crash the hunter's cognitive processes through computational overload rather than direct mathematical contradiction. "It's trying to break our minds," Marcus reported through gritted teeth, his instruments detecting processing demands that approached the theoretical limits of human neural capacity, counterattacking with cognitive warfare rather than pure logic. Zarathek watched her supposed trainee engage in philosophical combat that operated beyond her understanding, wielding mathematical concepts as weapons against creatures that existed as living information. The transformation from liability to essential team member was complete, but, more importantly, Marcus was demonstrating capabilities that suggested humans might indeed possess unique advantages for ultra-class warfare. "Can you counter the cognitive attack?" she asked. "Working on it," Marcus replied, sweat beading on his forehead from the mental strain. "Human consciousness has built-in protection against recursive overload. We compartmentalize complex problems instead of processing them as unified systems. It's usually a limitation, but in this case it might be an advantage." The battle of minds continued for several intense minutes, with Marcus systematically dismantling the entity's cognitive warfare attempts while maintaining his own logical frameworks. His approach was methodical rather than brilliant, grinding through complex philosophical constructs with stubborn determination rather than elegant insight. "Got it," he announced suddenly, as the ultra-class entity's defenses collapsed under sustained analytical pressure. The recursive protection was dependent on continuous logical validation. "I just proved that continuous validation creates infinite regress, which violates mathematical foundations of existence itself." The final ultra-class entity faced the same choice as its predecessors: accept fundamental logical contradiction or cease to exist. It chose non-existence, vanishing from reality as its mathematical framework collapsed under the weight of unresolvable paradox. "Ultra-class hunting ground cleared," Marcus reported, though his exhaustion was obvious. 3 entities eliminated through mathematical warfare. No casualties among hunting team. The achievement was unprecedented in guild history. Not only had they successfully engaged ultra-class prey, but they had done so without losing a single team member. The tactical implications were staggering, but equally important was the demonstration that human cognitive patterns provided genuine advantages for mathematical warfare. Zarathek examined the now stable dimensional convergence point with professional satisfaction and philosophical bewilderment. They had literally fought battles against the mathematical foundations of existence and emerged victorious through superior logic rather than superior firepower. "Assessment of human capabilities for ultra-class hunting?" she asked her team. Veltar flexed his claws thoughtfully. Marcus demonstrated tactical adaptability that exceeded expectations. Human cognitive patterns appear uniquely suited for mathematical warfare applications. Recommendation: immediate advancement to full guild hunter status with specialization in ultra-class engagement. SYPH uncoiled in agreement. His analytical approach to complex logical problems proved superior to conventional combat methodologies. Humans may indeed represent the galaxy's optimal ultra-class hunting specialists. Brackthal rumbled his massive frame in consideration. Traditional weapons and tactics proved irrelevant, but human mathematical frameworks provided decisive advantages. Guild training protocols will require complete revision to incorporate ultra-class warfare methodologies. Marcus looked overwhelmed by the praise and recommendations. "I appreciate the confidence, but I still consider myself a trainee. I got lucky with some theoretical knowledge and human cognitive patterns that happen to apply to unusual situations." "Luck," Zarathek replied, "is preparation meeting opportunity. You prepared more thoroughly than any of us anticipated, recognized opportunities we missed entirely, and successfully adapted to tactical challenges beyond our experience. That demonstrates competence far above trainee level." As they prepared for extraction from Netherworld Prime, Zarathek found herself contemplating the broader implications of their mission success. The discovery of ultra-class entities and development of mathematical warfare techniques would revolutionize guild operations, but More importantly, it would completely reshape galactic perceptions of human capabilities. Marcus began uploading their mission data to guild databases, ensuring that the intelligence they had gathered would be available for analysis and tactical development. The mathematical frameworks for ultra-class detection and engagement represented advancement beyond anything in existing guild protocols. The Leviathans were right about human advantages, he observed as he completed the data transfer. Our mathematical approaches are optimized for elegant solutions rather than brute force applications. That translates directly to superior performance in mathematical warfare situations. What are the implications for future human involvement in guild operations? Zarathek asked. Marcus considered the question carefully. Complete paradigm shift. If ultra-class hunting becomes a priority, humans will transition from marginal participants to essential specialists. The guild will probably establish dedicated ultra-class hunting divisions with predominantly human personnel. And for galactic civilization as a whole, massive changes in human status and capabilities, access to advanced technology, significant resource allocation for hunter training, probable transformation into a primarily military culture focused on reality defense operations. Veltar added his perspective. Ultra-class entities represent existential threats that conventional military forces cannot address. If humans provide the only effective countermeasures, your species would become indispensable for galactic security. The extraction beacon activated as their pilot detected their signal from orbit. The flight back to guild headquarters would provide time for detailed mission debriefing and tactical analysis, but Zarathek suspected their preliminary reports would cause significant disruption in guild command structures. Marcus, she said as they prepared for departure, I owe you an apology. I initially dismissed you as a liability based on preconceptions about human limitations. Your performance exceeded my expectations in every possible measure. Marcus smiled slightly. Preconceptions about humans are usually wrong in both directions. We're not as weak as most species assume, but we're also not as strong as we sometimes claim. We're just different, and sometimes different approaches provide unexpected advantages. Your species' analytical philosophy proved superior to conventional hunting methodologies, Swi-Phona observed. Guild training protocols emphasize overwhelming prey through superior capabilities. Human approaches emphasize understanding prey well enough to exploit fundamental weaknesses. It's a survival strategy, Marcus explained. Humans aren't apex predators by nature, so we learn to survive through intelligence and adaptation rather than raw power. Turns out those skills scale up to ultra-class warfare applications. As their extraction ship departed Netherworld Prime's chaotic electromagnetic environment, Zarathek transmitted their preliminary mission report to guild headquarters. The response was immediate and intense, with multiple command-level officials requesting detailed briefings and tactical analysis. Guild Command is very interested in our ultra-class intelligence, she announced as communication channels filled with priority messages. We are directed to proceed immediately to headquarters for comprehensive debriefing and tactical development. Marcus looked nervous about the attention their mission was attracting. I hope I can explain the mathematical warfare techniques clearly enough for broader guild application. A lot of the tactical decisions were based on human intuition rather than formal analysis. Your intuition proved accurate, Brackthal rumbled approvingly. Guild training will adapt to incorporate human cognitive methodologies. During the flight to guild headquarters, Zarathek reviewed their mission recordings and found herself increasingly impressed by Marcus's tactical evolution. From nervous trainee to confident ultra-class hunter in a single mission represented advancement that should have required years of experience and training. The guild will want to understand how human cognitive patterns translate to mathematical warfare capabilities, she told Marcus as they prepared their detailed reports. Your personal development during this mission provides important data about human learning rates and adaptability. I was just applying basic human problem-solving approaches to unusual situations, Marcus replied modestly. Any human with appropriate mathematical background could probably achieve similar results. That assessment suggests humans could provide large-scale, ultra-class hunting capabilities rather than individual specialists, Veltar observed. If mathematical warfare skills are broadly distributed among your species rather than limited to exceptional individuals, the implications are even more significant. Syphona tasted the air thoughtfully. Guild Command will want immediate assessment of human population potential for ultra-class hunter training. If large numbers of humans can develop these capabilities, galactic security planning will require complete revision. The implications were staggering. Ultra-class hunting represented threats and opportunities beyond anything in existing guild frameworks. But if humans could provide effective countermeasures, it would transform both human civilization and galactic power structures fundamentally. As they approached guild headquarters, Zarathek reflected on how dramatically her perceptions had changed over the course of a single mission. She had begun with a team of elite hunters plus one human liability. She was ending with a revolutionary tactical specialist who had redefined the boundaries of possible guild operations. "Marcus," she said as they prepared for docking, "I would be honored to serve under your command on future ultra-class hunting missions." The offer represented complete reversal of their original command structure, but mathematical warfare required expertise that went beyond conventional hunting experience. Marcus had demonstrated capabilities that made him the logical choice for leading ultra-class operations. "I appreciate the confidence," he replied, "but I think we work better as a team, where everyone contributes their specialized expertise. You have tactical leadership skills I lack, and the others provide capabilities that complement human approaches rather than replacing them." Zarathek found his collaborative attitude refreshing after years of guild hierarchy based primarily on combat capability rankings. Ultra-class warfare might require organizational structures that emphasized diverse expertise over individual dominance. As their ship docked with guild headquarters, priority communication channels activated with unprecedented intensity. Their mission had attracted attention from the highest levels of guild command, and preliminary reports were already triggering major policy reviews and resource allocation discussions. "Welcome back," announced Guild Commander Torvak as they disembarked, his massive crystalline form towering over the reception area. "Your preliminary reports have generated significant interest among Guild leadership. We require immediate comprehensive debriefing and tactical analysis." Marcus looked overwhelmed by the formal reception and high-level attention their mission was receiving. "I hope our intelligence proves useful for future Guild operations." "Young human," Torvak replied, his tone carrying unprecedented respect. "Your tactical innovations have revolutionized our understanding of possible Guild operations. Ultra-class hunting represents advancement beyond our previous conceptual frameworks." As they proceeded to the debriefing facilities, Zarathek realized that their single mission had changed everything. Marcus was no longer a trainee being evaluated for basic competence. He had become the galaxy's foremost expert on mathematical warfare against reality-threatening predators, and the Guild would restructure its entire operational philosophy around the capabilities he had demonstrated. The human who had been dismissed as a liability had proven to be the most significant tactical advancement in Guild history. And based on his continued insistence that any human with appropriate training could achieve similar results, this was only the beginning of a transformation that would reshape galactic civilization itself. The Apex Hunters had indeed stepped aside, but not in defeat. They had found something far more valuable than another competitor for hunting territories. They had discovered a partner species whose unique capabilities could protect reality itself from threats that existed beyond conventional understanding of danger. As they entered the Guild's most secure briefing facilities, Marcus turned to Zarathek with a slight smile. "Thank you for giving me the chance to prove myself. This has been the most educational experience of my life." "Thank you," she replied sincerely, "for showing me that the galaxy still holds surprises worth discovering." The future of hunting had arrived, and it spoke with a human voice that asked questions no one else had thought to consider. The trainee had become the teacher, and the galaxy would never be the same.